Hey everybody, welcome back to the Seagull Football Network. I'm Braden. Usually my brother Ben is on. He is currently on a temporary leave of absence. He had a lot going on, was really busy, so he's had to take a step back for a little bit. Today we have on one of our editors, Jack. He's joining me today to talk about the second half of the AFC East with the Miami Dolphins and New York Jets. Once again, it was kind of a quiet news week, so I don't have anything to talk about there. So we are going to go ahead and jump in with the second ranked team from the AFC East in 2024 in the Miami Dolphins. Starting off with their greatest strength, I think that their biggest strength going into 2025 is going to be their run defense. PFF ranked the Dolphins sixth in run defense grade in 2024, and they were second in yards allowed before contact at only 0.8 yards, which is absolutely ridiculous. Hitting the opposing running back less than a yard after they've started a run is completely insane. And not only were they already strong in this area, but they added players to help bolster this specifically. They drafted 3 total defensive tackles in 2025 in the first, fifth, and seventh rounds, one of which I'm going to talk about later on. But Jack, what do you see as the Dolphins' biggest strength in 2025?
Yeah, so I actually added the offense, really more talking like specifically about, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. They're obviously like one of the best wide receiving duos currently in the league. That being said, they also do have, a good running game in the sense of Devon A-Chain. I mean, he wasn't as good last year as he was his rookie year, but he was still very well. He still played very well. He still put up the numbers you want from a starting running back. And when you have a good running back like that, that can help lead into passing the ball better. And when you have 2 fast wide receivers, you don't have to as a quarterback wait as long for someone to get open because usually they're running faster than whoever's covering them. So I have the offense there. There are a few, concerns with the offense, with the offensive line. We've seen, injuries with Tua the last few years. And I'll get into that a little bit more in detail in a little bit. But I think the Dolphins have a potential to have a really good offense this year. Maybe not top 10, but I do think they'll be a top half in the league, assuming that Tua stays healthy and everybody around that stays healthy. Just because of Tyreek and Waddle, Westbrook and Keenan in the slot as well, or he's projected to be. And he was pretty good in Tennessee. I would know as a Jaguars fan, we really couldn't do a lot to stop him. But when you have 2 fast guys and then an experienced veteran coming in to play that number 3, it can really help open up an offense. And as long as Tua stays healthy, I don't see this offense not being explosive, at least at the start. They might slow down towards the end of the season, but at the start I could see them winning games people don't expect them to win because of the offense being able to start hot and continue that way throughout the whole game.
Yeah, I know Tyreek has expressed a lot of frustration with how the offense went last season. Obviously, they did slow down a little bit from 2023, but he seems to be putting in a lot of work to make sure that's not going to happen again. He seems pretty committed to being the first wide receiver to have 2,000 yards. That being said, this kind of does play right into what I picked out as their biggest weakness, which is the offensive line. I think if anything is going to hold the offense back, it's going to be that line. We already saw some regression from 2023 to 2024 from the offensive line. They allowed 56 sacks last season and ranked bottom half in pass protection and run blocking. And despite the explosive nature of their run game, fronted by third-year back Devon A-Chain, like you mentioned, the Dolphins' backs only averaged 1.06 yards before contact, so they're not getting a whole lot of space right off the start of each run. That puts them at 28th in the league last year. Tack on the fact that Teron Armstead just retired this past offseason. The Dolphins are staring down some major offensive issues if the line can't really pull together. That's what I picked out as the biggest weakness. I think that's what could hold the offense back. What do you see as the biggest weakness for the Dolphins?
Yeah, I have Tua's health. A lot of that will go hand in hand with how well the offensive line plays. But we have seen a lot since 2020 when Tua was drafted to the Dolphins. He is concussion prone. He's had 6 or 7 concussions since he's come into the league, and having a weak offensive line and being prone to concussions just makes the concern a little bit higher. And I do think that there's pieces around Tua to help this offense play well this year. It'll just be how well, like if Tua can stay up. And obviously you have people who talk about, Tua not protecting himself. We saw with that one concussion he got last season, where he didn't dive, but, he went headfirst into the, I think it was DeMar Hamlin, and went out with a concussion. And people were saying that was Tua's fault. He should have slid, whatever. But that is the real reason why I said Tua's health, not just the offensive line, because a lot of the health with Tua is going to also come to what kind of things he's doing, when it comes to being in the gym and, the physical things he's doing to help his body be able to take a hit, just as much as the offensive line is going to block for him. And so if he hasn't really done much to help him on a physical level, the offensive line can play really well this year, and it still might not matter. He could still go down with an injury, and they'll have to have Quinn Ewers or whoever else they have behind him on the roster come in and play the rest of the season out. But if he has done the thing, he's gotten a trainer to help him figure out how to protect himself better if the pocket does collapse or if he is running or, whatever, and he's able to stay healthy, I do think this offense and the Dolphins could be a fairly good team.
Yeah, I totally agree. I love Tua. I think he's a great quarterback. I love watching him play. I really hate seeing him get hurt over and over like this, and people start talking about retirement. So hopefully he's able to stay healthy. On that same topic, talking about the best veteran addition for the Dolphins, I wanted to say KJ Britt on the defensive side of the ball. However, because the offensive line is such a focal point for this team currently, I do have to go instead with kind of a double team addition of guard James Daniels and tackle Larry Borum. Daniels is ranked pretty well by ESPN since 2018 when he joined the league, although the biggest concern with him is that he is coming off a torn Achilles that kept him out of all but 4 games, I believe, last season. And while Borum hasn't been incredible during his time in the league, he may be required to start, and I think he'll be at least an average option for the Dolphins. But it's clear to me that they're at least looking to try to add some bodies there to protect Tua better. Obviously, the retirement of Teron Armstead, like I mentioned, is a pretty big blow to the offensive line. He's always been a top-rated tackle. He's been amazing. Not onto his blind side because he throws lefty, but protecting that left side of the line, he's been very, very good. So those are the 2 veterans that I kind of went with. Who did you pick out as the Dolphins' best veteran addition?
Yeah, I picked out Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. I talked about him a little bit when I talked about the Dolphins' strength. As I mentioned before, I am a Jaguars fan, and so we've had to play against him every year the last 4 seasons, two times a season. So I know him very well, and he's very good at getting open. Like I said, I believe he'll be playing slot this season. I don't see why he would play above Hill or Waddle. But him playing the slot is perfectly fine. When you have 2 really fast wide receivers at your 1 and 2 guys that have proven the last 3 years, 4 years, whatever, that they work well together and that they can tear defenses apart, there's a little bit more of a focus on covering them or at least slowing them down. You're not going to ever be able to completely lock up someone as fast as Tyreek Hill, someone as fast as Jalen Waddle, but you can still do things to slow them down. And so having a experienced wide receiver playing that slot position, playing that guy who doesn't need to go super deep, can go 15, 20 yards down the field, and, run an out, run a corner, something like that, for Tua to dump the ball off to if the pocket does collapse or if the defense is slowing down Waddle or Hill more than, maybe he would like. Having that third option that is reliable, will catch the ball, will get open, could help the offense open up later in the season because, teams are really good at slowing down Waddle and Hill first 3 to 5 games of the season, and you are constantly, feeding Westbrook and Keenan, and he's getting touchdowns, he's getting catches. Now every team coming in is now going to have to start focusing on Westbrook and Keenan as well, which will then help Hill and Waddle get open more and help them get more targets and more touches. And now opposing defenses will have to figure out, how do we prepare for all three of them rather than how do we prepare for just the two. And doing that will then open the offense a lot more as a whole. And as long as Tua can stay healthy, Tua can make it work. We've seen it in the past. And so I think he is a really good addition. I think he will be a really good addition for the Dolphins moving forward.
Yeah, I totally agree. As a Titans fan, I'm going to miss him a lot in Nashville. He was awesome. I think he was kind of underrated for a little while, up until about 2 seasons ago, where he really proved that he could be a super solid wide receiver 2 to 3. Obviously, he had that great, I think, 98-yard touchdown last season against Minnesota. That was super fun to watch. But I think the really kind of underrated aspect of him joining the Dolphins offense is the size that he brings. Obviously, Tyreek and Waddle, they're not huge guys. And Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, he's not massive, but he is 6'2", 200, I think, 15 pounds. So he brings a little bit more size and durability, I think, to their offense as well. And he's proven that, especially on like key third downs, he can find a way to get open, snag a pass that you never should, normally we'd say there's no way he's going to catch that. And he'll bring it in for a key first down. So, yeah, I really love the addition of NWI to the Dolphins offense, though I am going to miss him a lot in Tennessee.
Right. And to mention on the size is, normally you want your number 3, your slot guy, to be a little bit smaller, because that way they can kind of weave in and out of the defense and get open easier. But having, a slot guy who is bigger, now you can play him almost more as a tight end. Obviously, he wouldn't play tight end. He wouldn't be blocking. He wouldn't be running the same kind of routes. But having a bigger slot, you can almost do more of a 2 tight end kind of look, where you have him line up maybe as tight end and then break out into a normal route that you would normally see a wide receiver or something run. But also, you don't have to worry about placing the ball in the exact right spot like you do with some smaller guys, because he's big. So you could throw it over the head of somebody and he will go up and get it. And that is really one thing that will help open up the offense, is you got 2 small guys on the outside, 1 big guy on the inside. And now it's these 2 small guys are going deep, or they're running, something, using the speed to get open. Now you have a big guy who you can throw the 50-50 ball to, whether that's over the middle or on the outside, and you have a good chance of him coming down with it because of his size.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest, I don't actually know how much he'll stay in the slot. If I had to guess, I would think he would actually shift to the outside opposite Hill, and I think they'll shift Waddle into the slot a little bit more. But honestly, there may be a pretty firm rotation.
Yeah, I could see that. I was only saying slot because ESPN had him labeled as the number 3 and the slot guy, which is why I was kind of viewing. Obviously, Josh Daniels, that's not his name. Mike McDaniels. He'll run the team the way he wants it. The offense, people will line up where he wants them, and there's a good chance that he's already decided who's playing where and hasn't said anything yet. But yeah, I could also see him playing a lot more on the outside and shifting Waddle more inside, which I think would also be really good, because now you either have players playing, defenses playing further up to stop Waddle getting open over the middle, and now you have Nick Westbrook and Keenan getting open on the outside, or you have them playing deep, expecting Keenan to go deep a lot more, and now you have Waddle open over the middle. So either way, it would work, and I think either way, it's a good addition. I think he will help the offense open up a lot more, especially a lot more than they were last year, and I think it could really help the offense.
All right, moving on to the best rookie addition for the Dolphins. This is a player I talked about a little bit previously. That is defensive tackle Kenneth Grant out of Michigan. While I and Ben also definitely expected the Dolphins to go with a corner with the 13th overall pick, I love taking Kenneth Grant here. I praised his physical and mental game fairly extensively in the defensive line deep dive that we did before the draft, and I think he's a great fit for this defense. I think like I said, he's going to come fill in, help bolster the run defense even more, stop teams from being able to run on them. I think he's pretty good in the pass rush situations as well. On passing downs, he's quick, he's strong. and he has the attitude to get to the quarterback and bring him down. So I really love this fit. I think maybe the biggest issue for him is going to be adjusting to that temperature down in Miami. Going from Michigan to Miami is a tough transition. Who did you pick out as their best rookie?
Yeah, I also picked out Kenneth Grant. I had him labeled as the best defensive tackle in this draft. Obviously, his teammate, Mason Graham, there we go. Obviously, he went to Cleveland at number 5. He was taken before Grant. Grant was taken at 13. But I think the reason that Mason Graham went higher than Grant did isn't because I don't think Graham is the better player. I think he had the better stats. And when I say that is I think a lot of opposing offensive lines when they were game planning for college, when they were playing against Michigan, had their main focus on Grant. And because he had the main focus on Grant, it was letting Mason Graham get through the line a lot more, get a lot more pressure on the quarterback and put up the numbers he did. And I think that teams looked at that and said, oh, he put up these numbers. He's good. And I'm not saying Mason Graham is not a good defensive tackle by any means. But I do think that his stats were helped and how well he played was benefited from having Kenneth Grant on the other side of him, getting all that focus and having offensive lines have more of a focus on him to protect their quarterback from him. And I think there's a real possibility Kenneth Grant could end up winning Defensive Rookie of the Year this year. I think he could come in and he'll dominate. I think he could come in and just put up, double-digit sacks in his first season. I think it's possible. And I think there's really not anything that can slow him down. I mean, maybe like the Eagles offensive line or, a team that has a really good offensive line, they might be able to. But there's a lot of teams this year whose offensive line, they have one or two really good pieces, but the line as a whole isn't amazing. And I think that there's a good chance that he could have 2 or 3 sacks a game in a few games just because teams aren't going to know how to stop him. And he is really good at getting the pressure. He's good at moving. He's good at getting off blocks. And I think he was a great pick. I was also expecting them to go corner like you guys were. I was expecting Will Johnson to go to Miami at 13. Obviously, he dropped to the second round. Someone like Grant playing on that line on a team that's already really good at stopping the run, but has never really been good at actually getting to the quarterback, at least the last few seasons, could tremendously help a struggling Dolphins defense and a struggling Dolphins team who isn't terrible, but also isn't in a place right now where they are really expected to compete for a Super Bowl. But if he can come in and have a Aiden Hutchinson-like season in his rookie year and continue that, we could see, the Dolphins could be a serious contender in 2 or 3 seasons from now. So I love that. I think he was going to be a good rookie this year. I think he's going to be I think it was a great pick.
Yeah, interesting. I'm not sure I agree that he's better than Mason Graham, though I would love to see him really flourish there. That'll definitely be a prediction we'll have to write down though and keep track of for that Defensive Rookie of the Year. But that being said, let's talk about what we think their record is going to look like. Looking through their schedule, it looks pretty tough. Unless a lot of things end up going their way, I'm just not sure that a winning record is really in the books this season. So I went with a record of 7-10, with a floor of 5-12, and a ceiling of 10-7. I think they could have a winning record if things go well, but I think if Tua gets injured or if the offense just can't figure out how to get moving, I really see them not having a great season. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, all of mine are similar. I have a record of 8-9, so one more win than you have them going. But I do think 8-9 is only possible if Tua stays healthy. I think if Tua goes down, they'll hit the floor I have, which is 6-11 or worse. And I think I have their ceiling at 10-7, just like you do. I think their offense, they have the potential to win 10 games with how good their offense is. It would just kind of depend on the defense. And I think a lot of that will also depend on what kind of pressure they can get on the quarterback. and how the corners and the secondary and everything plays. But yeah, they're very similar. I do think though a lot of their success or lack thereof will depend on the offense.
That wraps up the Miami Dolphins. Let's jump in and talk about the New York Jets. Starting off with their greatest strength, I picked their offensive potential. The Jets roster is not amazing. I'll just go ahead and say it. Many analysts have it in their bottom 5 for rosters. However, I think if a couple players on the offense live up to the potential that they've flashed over the last couple seasons, the Jets offense really could surprise many people. Specifically, I think the pressure is on Justin Fields, Breece Hall, and Garrett Wilson to really step up and have good seasons. Fields had some very solid games last year in Pittsburgh, even behind a weaker offensive line. And I actually really like the Jets' offensive line this year. I think it's a really solid group, which should also help Breece Hall, who in his 3 seasons so far has not hit 1,000 rushing yards. He keeps getting hyped up as like a top 10, top 5 running back, but I just don't see the production yet to back that up. However, I think that if those 3 can really step up and have good to great seasons, the Jets offense can be really, really good. What are your thoughts, and what did you pick as their biggest strength?
Mainly picked offensive line. I think I agree that this is a better offensive line than the Steelers had last year, than Justin Fields had last year. And I think with a Jets team that isn't super good, having an offensive line that you don't really have to worry about, or don't have to worry about as much going into the season, is definitely a good thing. I also kind of split it with the wide receiver corps, and I'll get into that a little bit. Obviously they have Garrett Wilson, Alan Lazard, and I think Malachi Corley is who's projected to be that number 3. Obviously they don't have a true number 1. Some could argue they don't have a true number 2 either. But I do think that these 3 guys have potential to have a good season this year. It all kind of ultimately depend on how well Justin Fields plays. And if you throw, their 2nd round pick, Mason Taylor, into there, the tight end out of LSU, it could very much just open up their passing game as a whole. We've seen what tight ends can do. Tight end who's able to go out, and now defenses have to focus on them as well. We've seen the Chiefs have done it. So have the Ravens with Mark Andrews. They've had guys who were great pass catchers, great route runners, and now when they're out running a route, it's usually, if they aren't getting the ball, if Kelsey's not getting the ball, if Andrews wasn't getting the ball, it usually led to somebody else being open, or being open enough to, get a pass thrown to them and them coming down with it. And I could see Mason Taylor helping that with some of these 3 guys. I'm also, though, really excited for Garrett Wilson. I think he'll have a good season this year. And the only reason I think that is Garrett Wilson and Justin Fields were teammates at Ohio State the same year. They were either drafted the same year or a year apart. I can't remember. But they were teammates. And so they've obviously worked together. And obviously that's been, seasons have come and gone before they actually have worked with each other. But they have. They played together 4 seasons at Ohio State. 3 or 4 seasons at Ohio State. And so they know how each other's plays. And I could very well see Garrett Wilson helping elevate Justin Fields, or Justin Fields helping elevate. I would look out for that. I do think that there's a good chance that Garrett Wilson plays well, just because he has a quarterback he's familiar with, a quarterback who's familiar with him. That being said, I will move to what I think is the New York Giants' biggest weakness, and that is also the wide receiving room. While I do think they have the potential to be good this year, while I do think they have the potential to be better than people were expecting them to be, that not be, a top 10 or maybe not even top 15 receiving room in the country. I do think that they have the potential to be better than a lot of people are expecting. However, I do think they have the potential to also just be what people expect it to be mediocre, just not really contribute a whole lot to the Jets offense at all. But obviously time will tell. And I like I've said already, I think a lot of that will kind of depend on Justin Fields, how well he plays, and how well, if at all, his connection with Garrett Wilson is still. So, what about you? What's your biggest weakness for the Jets?
Yeah, I had completely forgotten, honestly, that Fields and Wilson had played together. So that's a really good point there. Um, and it is interesting how I could see their receiver room doing really well, or I could see them kind of falling apart and not being super great. So I understand where you're coming from there. For their weakness, though, I did go a different direction. I flipped to the defensive side of the ball. Um, Overall, the Jets defense, where it stands, is not how they looked in 2023. They fell from a 90 rating from PFF in 2023 to a 64 in 2024. New head coach Aaron Glenn is a defensive coach and a former cornerback, and I expect the defense should improve again this season. However, their safeties specifically are not great. So that's who I'm picking out as their biggest weakness. Fourth year safety Tony Adams hasn't played a full season yet, and he's had mediocre stats. He's been all right, but nothing really special. He's joined by former Jaguar and Andre Cisco, who also had some rough seasons, including getting benched last year for his performance. Both had their best seasons statistically in 2023, so if they can kind of go back to that same form together at the same time, I think they could look good. But generally, going into this season so far, I'm concerned about that position group.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I think with Aaron Glenn coming in, I do think the defense is going to look better. I mean, they're not going to look elite, they're not going to look amazing, but they will look better. Obviously, they still have Sauce Gardner back there at corner. He's still very good. But I do think a lot of it will come down to safety play. As a Jaguars fan, I will touch on Cisco a little bit. He is good. He is good when he's good. And I know that that's kind of, an anticlimactic thing to say. It doesn't really, answer things. He's shown flashes that he can be a good safety in the league. He's great at playing zone. He's fast, or great in Jaguar standards at playing zone. Maybe not in the league. But he can do it. I don't think I've seen him drop many interceptions. I mean, I haven't seen him get that many interceptions either, but when he does get the ball in his hand, usually it's a pick. And so if Aaron Glenn can take the potential from Andre Cisco that he still has, that he hasn't, unleashed yet, if you want to say that, I do think he could end up playing better for New York than he ever did for Jacksonville. But it'll kind of just depend on how much he's willing to develop and how much he's actually willing to work with Aaron Glenn and this new Jets, defensive coaching staff that he isn't used to or whatever, and how much he really wants to continue going when it comes to him. But yeah, as a whole, I kind of agree. The defense isn't amazing. I mean, obviously they have pieces, like I've said, Sauce Gardner, and a few others. But the defense will really be kind of, I think, what'll make or break this team. Even though the offense isn't great, we've seen it in the past where you've had. I mean, I'll use Cincinnati from last year. They had a great offense, dropping 40 points a game. But the defense couldn't stop anybody until they went 9-8. When realistically, they should have probably won 2 or 3, maybe even 4 extra games that season, but they couldn't because of the defense. And so if the offense does look better than people are expecting, if the wide receivers do play really well, if Justin Fields does play really well, the Jets' success will be built on how well the defense plays. And I would say that's probably the biggest concern moving forward for the Jets would be, we got to get this defense playing well. We got to be sure we're able to finish games out if we're winning. Got to be sure we can stop the other team from scoring, but also be sure we're able to get back in games if we are losing. And both things are very important for defenses. And I mean, time will tell, but I definitely see where you're coming from, and I would definitely agree with you.
Yeah, well, the guy I picked out as their best veteran addition is a guy we've mentioned a couple times here now, and that is quarterback Justin Fields. This move, when it was announced, was a pretty big surprise to me, honestly. I really didn't expect for them to jump on Fields. But the more that I've thought about it, the more I really like this pickup. In 2024, Fields started 6 games and had career bests in completion percentage and interceptions thrown. He played some of his cleanest football yet before being benched for Russell Wilson. And I think Fields here in New York has a chance to not only revitalize his own career, but the Jets' offense as well. Obviously, we talked about he has a better offensive line now than he did in Pittsburgh. And honestly, I think most of his time with the Bears, I think this is a better offensive line. He's got weapons. Are they the best in the world? No. Is he going to be able to, work with them? Absolutely. I think so. He's going to have a pretty strong run game, and he adds on to the run game as well with him being a dual threat quarterback. So I'm actually really, really excited to see what Fields is able to do here in New York. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I agree. I also have Justin Fields as the best veteran addition to the New York Jets. Russell Wilson signed with the Giants, which I believe was before Fields signed with the Jets. My original thought was, so the Steelers are going to move forward with Fields as their quarterback, and go from there. And then Fields signed with the Jets, and I remember my same thought process was, okay, I didn't really see this coming. It made sense. They weren't in a position to draft a quarterback, or they had a top 10 pick, but they had bigger needs. And so they weren't going to do that. So obviously they were going to need to sign one. I think if Fields is going to be able to revitalize his career, this is going to be the season, or at least the 2 years he's going to be with the Jets is going to be when he can do it. I mean, we've seen players like Baker Mayfield, who everybody was saying, isn't a good quarterback. He went from the Browns and went to the Panthers and to the Rams, and then he went back to the NFC South to the Buccaneers, where he's been the last 2 or 3 seasons, and he looks good. This is the best football we've seen him play. We saw what Sam Darnold did last season with the Vikings. He looked a lot better than I think anybody even expected him to ever look. He looked really bad on the Jets, did not look much better with the Panthers, didn't really play much with the 49ers, and then went to the Vikings. And granted, yes, he did have, he was throwing to Justin Jefferson and, all that, but he still looked a lot better than he had been. And so being, we've seen that moving teams sometimes is what a quarterback needs. Sometimes it's the best thing they can do for their career. And he did look really good in Pittsburgh. I actually thought that he should have never been benched for Russell Wilson. I thought he played better football in those 6 games than Russell Wilson did the entire time he played last year. And I think that was enough for Aaron Glenn and the Jets front office to say, you know what, we can take this, we can do something with it. We sign him to a 2-year deal. If it doesn't work out, we'll build up the team and then get somebody when his contract's done. But not to mention they also have Garrett Wilson, like I was saying. And I think having a receiver that you're familiar with, even if you haven't, thrown the football to them in a few seasons or, at all since you've been in the league, having somebody you're at least familiar with that you can get that timing back and all that could definitely help. Not only Garrett Wilson, but Justin Fields. And so I really do expect Justin Fields to look a lot better this year, maybe even the best he's ever looked since he came into the NFL. Obviously, these weapons aren't the best, but I do think accuracy-wise, decision-making-wise, he's going to look the best we've seen him look. And I do think there's a high potential that in 2 seasons when his contract's up, the Jets, rather than replacing him with somebody else, re-sign him and keep him there as long as they possibly can.
Yeah, I agree. Alrighty, that does bring us now to the best rookie addition for the New York Jets. I went with their first-round pick, Armand Membou, the tackle out of Missouri. The Jets' biggest hole on the offensive line was certainly the right tackle position, especially after sealing their other tackle position last year in the first round with Olu Fashanu. Membou is another rookie that I praised prior to the draft. I did talk about him in the offensive line video. And I think he will do a really, really good job protecting Justin Fields and making lanes for Breece Hall. I think he's the perfect pick for the Jets. I didn't really see them going any other direction. So that's who I ended up going with as the best rookie. Who did you pick as the Jets' best rookie addition this year?
Yeah, I picked Mason Taylor, the tight end out of LSU. He was their 2nd-round pick. I really like Mason Taylor. Obviously, he was the 3rd tight end taken off the board after Colston Loveland and Tyler Warren. But I did see a lot of mock drafts projecting Mason Taylor to go late first round. A lot of people had a first round grade on him. I even saw some having him go around where Colston Loveland and Tyler Warren went. I think he is phenomenal. Like I was saying with with the wide receiver room when I was talking about them a little bit ago, I do think he will contribute a lot to how well this offense goes, how well the wide receivers play. But even I think it will contribute a lot with how well Justin Fields plays. When you have a tight end, someone who is going to come in and immediately start, and someone who can play tight end, he's done it really well at LSU for as long as he was there. I think he very well could come in and help Justin Fields, kind of get into a rhythm, get more comfortable with the Jets' offensive playbook. He can help open that offense up, help, maybe take some of the pressure off of Garrett Wilson or Alan Lazard or, a Malachi Corley or whoever they have out there playing wide receiver. He could take that out. He could take some of that pressure off, especially, mid to late part of the season if he has proved that he is a dangerous target and he is somebody that Justin Fields is willing to give the ball to and he can do something with it. And so I think he's a phenomenal pick. I do think taking him in the second was best. Obviously, Ormembu that they took in the first round was who they needed to take just to beef up that line for Justin Fields or whoever they had playing quarterback. I don't think Justin Fields was signed yet, but I don't remember. But either way, beefing up that line was good. And now you get your quarterback, a guy who can go out there and help open up the offense and help really just be a good safety valve for you throughout the whole season, right? And not to mention, you have that option of him coming in and blocking. So now you have that extra guy blocking for Fields. So now he has a little bit extra time in the pocket. Or, if he needs to roll out, he now has a guy who can immediately switch into blocking and help him get that extra space he needs to get a few extra yards.
Yeah, I think having a solid tight end is always a good thing. Obviously, rookies do tend to rely on tight ends a little bit more, but Fields, especially being a dual threat and not knowing exactly what we're going to get out of him, I like having a big body tight end available as a target. All right, that brings us to projected record for the Jets. Last thing here on the list. We've talked quite a bit about the strengths, the weaknesses. They also have a little bit of a tougher schedule. And while their roster isn't the best, I think Aaron Glenn and the rest of the coaching staff is going to draw the best out of them. So I don't have them improving tons over last year just yet. But I think generally it's going to be an upward trend in the outlook for the team, and I think in a couple of years they could easily have a winning record. That being said, I do have them going 6-11 this season with a floor of 4-13 and a ceiling of 8-9. What do you have as their projected record?
Right. So I will say this really quick. I think the Jets, while they aren't, a great team, they don't really have a lot of really good pieces. I do think with the Jets, it'll kind of be they're a lot better than people were expecting, or they're around where they were last season. I don't really think there'll be a middle. I think it'll really come down to how well Fields and the offense plays. I do think so. I think they finish, second or tie for second in the division, depending on what the Patriots and Dolphins do. But I could see that. I have their record at 8-9. I do think they will be, just because of Fields and the offense, I do think they will win more than 5 games like they did last season. Will it be 3 extra? Maybe not. They do have a bit of a harder schedule, but there are a lot of teams on this schedule, teams like the Falcons and the Jaguars and a few others that they could win. That could go either way, but that are very winnable games. And when you are a team like the Jets, who isn't amazing, isn't in a position to win the division currently, or even make a deep run in the playoffs, you want as many wins as you can get. And if it comes down to, I can beat these teams that are in the same position I am, but I can't beat these really, really good teams, sometimes that's good. And I think if Aaron Glenn can take a team that finished 5-12 last year and win 8 games, I think he will show the Jets organization and the Jets fan base that if you give me time, we will be good. We will get better, and we will be able to compete for a division title. That being said, I do have the floor at 5-12, which is where they were last season. I think they've improved from where they were last season, which is why I don't have them. Which is why I don't have their floor lower than last season. I think if they aren't great, they'll be around where they were last season. Ceiling at 10-7, which is the same that I had the Dolphins at. I don't see them going 10-7. I don't see them winning more than 8 games, if I'm going to be real. But I do think 10-7 is a possibility. Like I said, there's a lot of teams on their schedule this year that could go either way. And ultimately, we don't know. I mean, there could be teams out there who we expect to be really good that aren't, that they could end up squeezing a win out of. And so I think 10-7 is a possibility. That's what I have the ceiling as. But realistically, I think 8-9 is probably around where they'll finish.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Alrighty, well, thank you everyone for watching. We really appreciate it. If you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed, leave us a comment. Tell us, if you agree with any of our takes. If you disagree, let us know in the comments. Next week, we are going to be starting with the NFC North, talking about the Detroit Lions and the Chicago Bears. So be on the lookout for that next week, and we'll see you all then.